Now, still on the Facebook rapist story, Thabo Bester's escape has thrust the running of prisons by public-private partnerships into sharp focus. What are the risks, if at all, and that come with outsourcing a core function of the state like a prison? As early as 2010, this relationship has been described as a not uncontroversial one. Let's speak to the Institute of Race Relations campaign head, Gabriel Crouse. Mr. Crouse, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. What an elaborate prison break. I think many are still trying to wrap their heads around how this could have been possible. But if anything, it suggests something even more scarier, that there's almost nothing that is impossible if you have money. Where do you stand in this whole matter?
Indeed, I think that it's one of the most spectacular breakdowns in the South African criminal justice system. The evidence of Mr. Bester being able to act as if he was a New York celebrity investor, streaming into his own birthday celebration a few years ago, being followed up by this actual ability to escape the long arm of the law in what prima facie looks like must have involved the complicity of those entrusted to guard against prison breaks through bribery or whatever method, I think raises alarm bells. But I think it also raises those alarm bells in part because of South Africa's sense of so many other ways in which the criminal justice system is failing. We have increasing murder rates, and already from some of the higher rates in the world. If you look at other violent crimes, the stats are a little bit up and down, but particularly the sexual crimes or domestic violence, gender-based violence type crimes, figures not looking good there either. And if you look at the sort of prison break issue in particular, we can all remember Jacob Zuma, a former president, being released from prison by the then head of the correctional services, Arthur Fraser, on the basis that he deserved medical parole, which has been disagreed with by every court that's had a chance to look at it so far, and certainly was disagreed with at the time by the actual medical parole board. Those expert doctors inspected Mr. Zuma and said he doesn't need parole. So that was the grandest prison break, I would say, because it happened, as it were, in broad daylight. But I think the Bester's case further alarms South Africans who want law and order, who want justice to be crisp, to be speedy, and to be fair, and don't want to live lives of fear because criminals can do what they want if they've got enough cash, just as you said.
I like how you narrate the journey to justice for many victims, because it really is a very difficult one. Because you start with SAPS, it's sometimes difficult for any victim to actually register a case. You move from there, you go to the NPA, you're in our courts. It's very difficult to get a successful conviction. Somebody is then sentenced, they are incarcerated, and now you realize that even there's a hurdle. Some of those might actually be set free.
Yeah, it's a shocker. And I think that the South Africans are sometimes misconstrued as being a freewheeling bunch who, I think, you know, from the Institute of Race Relations perspective, we've got a long institutional memory, and many South Africans have a living memory of the days when you really couldn't trust the police to serve all South Africans because apartheid was baked into the system. But, you know, it's been a long time, and most South Africans just want straightforward law and order. They want the police to be their friends. They want the criminal justice system to be able to keep them safe. Most South Africans can't afford private security. Private security, of course, is outnumbering the police service, depending on how you count, probably 2 to 1. And a lot of people can't buy into that. So they are dependent on the government, on the police, criminal justice system to keep them safe, and aren't really being kept in the kind of safety and security that they deserve, that we deserve.
Would South Africans be wrong in assuming that there are probably a number of other Thabo Besters who are living very comfortably in prison, able to stream, able to be part of certain events from the comfortable prison cells of theirs, and even being assisted to escape, just that they're probably not as prominent? Do you think they'd be justified in thinking that there's probably been a number of escapes similar to this one, but of less prominent figures?
I think that it's a plausible hypothesis and one that should be investigated very seriously. I think that that kind of investigations is something that you'd imagine the State Security Agency or the Special Investigative Unit to get into. But we can remember the SID former head, Hermione Gilliamere, resigned because she felt that the Ramaphosa administration was not actually giving her the resources she needed to pursue the crimes. The very last thing that she did was put out an extradition order for the Guptas. The Americans have already attempted to help with that. But the government didn't fill out the paperwork afterwards to get them to come home. So there's some notorious criminals that were effectively let off the hook. If you look at correctional services itself, before Arthur Fraser...
no, but government on that one has filled out.
Tom Moyani.
Apologies to interject there, but insofar as the Gupta's extradition case is concerned, government at least, they've stated on numerous occasions that on their part, they've finalized everything. It's now with the other nation to deal with.
I think that is a contested matter. I would say that let me use another case, which I think is telling, of the KZN Correctional Services head, Mr. Ntlele, who was suspended for prima facie hard evidence of wrongful action in procurement, of corruption. And that suspension lasted for years. Eventually, it seems like he got back on the job because twice the Correctional Services Department failed to fill out the court documents, just heads of arguments that they needed in order to execute the final overturning of his attempt at an appeal. So I think that it's fair to say that even where legal action has gone forward, it hasn't gone forward as efficiently and as effectively as it needs to. The same kind of problem is riddled across the police, where partly you have breakdowns in forensic investigative abilities to track DNA on blood samples or samples involved with rape cases, but partly you also have all too often incorrect filing of warrants of arrest, of interdicts, and of arguments against accused persons that allow them to then get off the hook. Part of the legal system requires really getting the nitty-gritty details right. And by the way, one of the problems with the correctional service system is not just that. I think you're probably right that there are other cases similar to this but of a lower profile. I was trying to go through... But partly there are a lot of cases where people are wrongfully arrested and wrongfully detained without trial for years. The Institute of Race Relations has been tracking these numbers since the bad old days of apartheid, where detention without trial really was a systemic and overt, explicit way of trying to repress those people who were calling for all-race democracy. But detention without trial today has become a sort of quiet stain on the South African criminal justice system too, where on the one hand it's too soft on really hardened criminals that are able to bribe their way out. But on the other hand, it's hard on innocent people that are accused wrongfully. And we can track thousands of people that are sitting in detention without trial for over a year. That is a really hell of a long time to be sitting in a prison cell if you've done nothing wrong. So we're kind of getting it wrong on both sides. I think that part of the correctional services problem kicked in with the appointment of Tom Moyani as the head of the correctional services way back when, over a decade ago. He then went on to ruin SARS after that. And what he did was he helped Bosasa to uphold its contracts to sell food and blankets, all kinds of things into the prison system, even though there was already hardcore evidence from the Special Investigative Unit that they were dealing in bribes and kickbacks in order to buffer their bottom line. And, he stood up for that for 3 or 4 years and then was sent into early retirement and then came back and did another job. But I think since then it's fair to say that the correctional services system has clearly been on a downward slide, and it's getting it wrong in just about every way that it can.